Okay, in the last part of this lecture, what we're going to be looking at is two and what happens after Mao's death. So what you're going to listen to is the Great Leap Forward, the Cultural Revolution, and then what happens to China after Mao's death. All right, now remember, in order to understand the Great Leap Forward, we must remember that Mao loved the peasants and thought they were the answer to everything. So he believed in industrialization, but he said, I don't want to do it through factories. I want to do it as farms. I want to do it as farms. He uses communes as extra resources for building tractors and cement for irrigation. He establishes what he calls backyard furnaces. He's going to make steel in backyards without machines. I've got a picture coming up of that in a slide or two here in a few moments. And he's going to regulate all aspects of life through the communes. Everything will be regulated through communes. We can get an idea about how successful the Great Leap Forward is when you look at this picture I got right here. Whoops. These gentlemen are dragging scrap iron to be melted down to create new steel. Now, this is 1958. Look at the date up there, 58. If you were carrying scrap iron in 1958 in the United States, how do you think you were carrying it? That's right, in a truck. These guys, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9 guys hauling it by hand. Which do you think is more efficient? That's right, the trucks. So the backyard furnaces are not that efficient, not very efficient at all. In fact, the Great Leap Forward is really the Great Leap Backward, as you'll see. That's what we're calling it up here. Within months, the Great Leap Forward is a total failure. First of all, peasants, just like in Russia, just like in Cuba, just like in Cambodia, resist collectivization. You remember collectivization? That's the collecting of people from their individual farms onto a large farm. They have commune leaders and backyard factories and furnaces. Look at these. This picture up here on the right are the backyard furnaces. They look like giant pots, and they would try to get them hot enough to melt and create high quality steel. Do you think in these pots you're going to be able to create the level of steel you might in an industrial factory back in Pittsburgh? Of course not. Number 3, there's a horrible drought during this Great Leap Forward. So, okay, think of it this way, guys. You've got a bad policy, collectivization, and drought. Well, you've got the perfect storm for disaster for China. China actually, number 4, has to resort to importing grain. Here's a country that in the past has been able to feed its own. Now it can't. By 1960, 2 years, that's all it takes, 2 years, it is a total failure. In fact, it is such a big failure that Mao actually loses his position as chairman of the party. So the Great Leap Forward is not successful. This idea of peasants doing factory work on their own, industrialization in small communes, does not work very well. Not work very well at all. In fact, it leads to a great deal of hardship and suffering for the people of China. It leads to a great deal of suffering and hardship for the people of China. Now, I'm going to say one thing in Mao's defense. I'm not a fan of Mao. I'm not a fan of Mao. One thing in his defense, he apparently did not understand how bad things really were in the countryside. His leaders were a little afraid of, his followers or the men around him were afraid of him, and they told him everything was wonderful. Meanwhile, people out in the countryside are starving horribly. But I just said Mao lost his position of this chief of state in the early 60s. So that means Mao's gone, right? He'll never come back? Oh, no, he comes back. This time, though, first of all, I want to mention a couple things about women. We've got women hold up half the heavens. That's that scene. In what way did communism bring equality to women? First off, now women get to choose their marriage partners. It's not arranged marriages as it once had been. Women get the opportunity to work outside the home. In fact, in many cases, are expected to work outside the home. Do they achieve full equality? If you get a question like this in the AP exam, you can say no. They are held only cadre positions at lower and mid-level. In other words, some mildly, kind of, not really supervisor positions, but mildly technical positions, usually at the lower and middle levels. Now look at these posters here. These are propaganda posters from China. You've got the woman here on the left, the factory work, she's got her helmet on, she's got the rifle slung over her shoulder. On the far right, we've got a man and a woman. She's carrying the shovel off to work. And here you've got your idyllic family. You've got dad, mom, and, that's right, a boy. One child, because that'll be the Chinese policy, one child, and he's a boy. Remember back when we studied Confucianism, men are considered more valuable than women. Okay, Mao does come back and he makes one last big push. He pushes for something we call the Cultural Revolution. This is Mao's attempt to regain power. Now, he criticizes the efforts of his successors, the guys who followed him before he retook power. And one of the things he says is these guys are bourgeoisie. Now, if you know anything about communism, you know calling somebody bourgeoisie is an insult. It says you're part of the oppressors. He says these guys are oppressors. So he appeals to students, peasants, and the military to make his comeback. And one of the things he comes out with is something we call the Little Red Book. You'll notice these students over here are holding up the Little Red Book. Here on the left, you've got a worker with a sledgehammer, and he's crushing things of the West. And you'll notice religion down here. You've got the Buddhist statue and the statue of Christ. So they're stamping out religion and trying to bring back China. Now, think of it this way, guys. This is going to be a disaster too. You'll see why here in the next slide. Next, Cultural Revolution aimed at attacking what were called capitalist roaders. By that, they meant people who railroaded through capitalistic ideas. Instead, he said the students will be the Red Guard, and they criticized all of Mao's rivals. These included, number 6, professors, plant managers, and children of the elite. Often these people confessed. Notice I've got that in quotation marks. Why do you think I put it in quotation marks? That's right, because they aren't really confessing. They're just saying anything to stop what's going on with them, to try to save their lives. You've got down here a couple of professors. Now, I don't know what it says, but they're being hauled in front of people, and these essentially are confessions of their crimes. They went after doctors, lawyers, professors, the educated people. Now, you can guess what that does to China. If I get rid of my accountants, I get rid of my doctors, I get rid of my lawyers, my people are going to suffer. And they do suffer. They do suffer. Okay? The idea was that Mao saw us as a centralized state being taken back over by the people. You're not going to leave it to the intellectuals, you're going to take it over by the people. And it plunges the nation back into chaos. And Mao is forced to even retreat from this. Okay. Fortunately for China, after 70 million, somewhere in that range, and their numbers vary, you can argue about the numbers, but I'm going to throw out the number 60 to 70 million. 60 to 70 million people died due to starvation, torture, etc. Mao decides to die. Yay for China. So what happens after Mao dies? Well, there's the Gang of Four who try to take over and maintain his policies, but they don't last. So who took over after Mao's death? Since Mao's death, it's been the pragmatists. The pragmatists took over China. Now, a pragmatist, you'll remember what a pragmatist is. I mentioned them before. Do you remember what a pragmatist is? That's right. A pragmatist is somebody who does what is practical, what works. And the pragmatists say, listen, economically, China is a disaster. So maybe we need to open up China to the West. Maybe we need to allow more private peasant production. Maybe we'll end the communes and we'll start to allow businesses. Okay? We'll start to allow businesses, to private enterprise. Now, here's the key. They give up these. They give up this uh, economic control by the state. Not completely. They allow some, they still have heavy influence by it, but they'll give some of that up. So it's private peasant production, privately owned factories, communes end, but they will retain the communist government form. They'll retain the communist government form even though they start to introduce free enterprise. So it's odd. China's odd. Communist government with more of a capitalistic business. I went looking, searching for pictures of Chinese pragmatists. Couldn't really find anything good that I liked, but I did find this one. I thought this one was kind of funny. It's the translation, you guys will see, of Chinese. So it says, this is what she is very cute. This means she is very cute. It says, this is said of women of moderate beauty. This is Chinese. She is very patriotic. This is said of plain-looking women. She obeys the rules well. This is said of ugly women. And her writing is beautiful. This is said of extremely ugly women. So if you want to insult a girl today, what you got to do is you got to go out and say to her handwriting is beautiful. And you'll know that that means she's extremely ugly. Now, we'll be able to tell today who actually listened to the lectures, because I'm going to call a couple of our girls. I'll make reference to somebody obeying the rules well and somebody having beautiful handwriting, and we'll be able to see who paid attention. That's end of chapter 34. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in class.